to the show. This is The Force Always. My name is Diz, aka David Zammit, and this is, once again, the Morning Dew. And let's get on with the show with news, views, reviews, and interviews. Well, it's a big one because this has sort of been announced a while ago, but it has been announced officially again with a date, and that is the news of a Star Wars A New Hope, which was released in 1977, is going to get a re-release in 2027 for the 50th anniversary on February 19. This is before the Star Wars Celebration over there, before the release of Starfighter in that particular year. But when I said the actual title, Star Wars A New Hope, it's actually was known in the beginning as Star Wars. In the crawl at the beginning, it was Star Wars. There was no A New Hope or Episode 4 attached to it. So my opinion on about this later in the show, but that, yes, is now official. It's the original theatrical edition. How original it's going to be, that is probably the intricate waiting on decision. But yeah, so that's going to be February 19, 2027. That is an American date. Wishingly, that will be a worldwide date, but that's not confirmed as yet. But it will be, it has been said in cinemas widespread. So that could be a big release for a re-release, and that's making the news. To more news, no news, there's good news. There's no real news with Starfighter, the movie coming out 2027. There's no more news with The Mandalorian or Grogu. No news, just to let you know. Speaking of the morning, as I said before, always keep the spoon in it, just in case. So that is the news. Let's get into views. Views is my story idea. I accept stories. I accept the Star Wars storyline for what it is. Like, I just accept. I like it. I mean, it's not like, it's not accepting it in the way of, do you completely agree? But I accept it and enjoy what it is. The whole Star Wars story in this canon story timeline. Anyway, my story idea is sort of touching on what the part of the news is about re-releasing the particular original cut of Star Wars. Look, this is the story idea. It's not an actual story of created story, but the story of would this work for myself and or others. So this story, as it was written and directed and released in 1977, really has aged in its look, in the scenery, and even the actual film that it was filmed on. It's obviously being restored to the best capability, so it can be seen nowadays. It's obviously a preserved film as, cinematic history. But I've got to agree with George Lucas. I think personally, having released a first draft, which is technically what it was. Look, it was a final draft. It came to cinemas in 1977. It was a final draft, but, it was, a lot about it was a first draft. And according to George Lucas, you never finish your artwork. You could just add to it all the time, subtract from it all the time. But really, he took it as a first draft. When it got out there, it was massive. He re-released it in a special edition in 1997, I think it was, which I was so excited for and went to see that. The only THX cinema here What that actually means, I don't know, but it was a great cinema, and the only cinema here, where I'm from, Melbourne, Australia, at that time was in a place called Knox. I went all the way to Knox, which is about an hour away from where I am now, and I went to see it in there. It was just fun. It was exciting. I thought the added bonus things were like a great idea, and I thought they actually were good. They have aged themselves, the added bonus parts. But yeah, my story idea is that I don't know if I would want my first draft out there when the most important thing about Star Wars for me is pushing the story forward. Yet again, we're going backward, even though this is not like a prequel era. This is the original zero timeline era, if you were to think of it in the, I think BBY thing they use it as battle before Yavin. That's the sort of a 0 point there. It's sort of a marker. I wouldn't want it out there because it's a first draft. It's like, if you're in a school examination and you need to hand in an essay, 2,000-word essay, and you were given the choice to give your teacher your final draft, your absolute final draft after you had that examined, or would you give your first draft? I mean, I think it's obvious you give the final draft of what you have, even though back then in 1977 it was the final draft. There was a lot of things about that movie that was incredibly hard to make, and yes, it was just there was just things that had to be aborted because of budget or whatever reasonings, and it was considered by George Lucas a first draft. Handing in a first draft is not as good as a final draft. I am with George Lucas in this one. His final version, the latest version of Star Wars, whatever it was, which as far as I know is what you can see on Disney Plus. If you're watching A New Hope, that or A Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, not in that order, but and they are the ones you have on Disney Plus. That is the actual, approved final draft of George Lucas. That should be it. I think the only part that's going to cause a bit of chaos is the dislike and hate rather than coming from the Star Wars community when Star Wars gets released in 2027 as a re-release. The dislike and hate will actually come from your mainstream audiences going, this thing looks so old. It's like it's old. It's in the past. It's not exciting, because I think because of the age of it and because of the scenes that were originally used for that release back then. I think it's gonna the disc, and I think the mainstream audience is what Star Wars needs to really make this whole franchise be epic and massive again. Not just the Star Wars hardcore fans, but you need a mainstream audience to really uphold this to be a massive thing. Now, yes, you need to cater for the Star Wars fans, but you also need to cater for it's a movie going experience. And I think the experience for the mainstream fans is going to be interesting. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm guessing they're going to think it's a bit aged and old and it's not that interesting anymore. And that will be either shooting themselves in the foot, or that could just generate a real buzz. But we don't know until it gets released. I'm guessing it may happen. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So that's a story idea was more of an opinion, but it's a story idea. I would prefer the latest and the final cut of Star Wars to be what we have on Disney Plus, as that is what the creator ultimately wanted Star Wars to come off like, that particular final draft. I'm sure there's something to fix about that as well, in his opinion, George Lucas. Anyway, that's my my story idea for this time around. Let's get into reviews. Now, I've got something really interesting to show you guys. I hold this to be one of the most prized things in my history. Speaking of excitement, when I got the opportunity to go to Star Wars Celebration in I think 2017 in Orlando, the excitement of the lead up was for me absolutely fever pitched. So I, did not know what to do, how to do this. I just sort of winged it a lot. It was really hard work, I'll tell you that. Waiting in lines, going through the crowds, understanding what's going on, why, when, how. But the lanyard and the actual tickets, when I got the tickets, I was like excited. This is the lanyard, and look at it. It's based on the actual medallion in A New Hope or Star Wars from 1977 that Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and unfortunately Chewbacca did not get. But it's based on that sort of medal that they won with the lanyard attached to it, and these are the tickets. I got like at that time the tickets. I actually got four separate. It was 4 separate days. 4 separate days passes, and I kept them, and that's it. This is for me. This is a 10. Also, fun fact. This here, I used in a photo. I actually got Peter Mayhew to wear, without all the badges and without the tickets, Peter Mayhew to wear this around his neck in a photo I had with him. This is 2 weeks before he passed away, so he could just wear the medallion. I'm sure others did that, I don't know, but I just thought, what a great opportunity. Peter Mayhew was at that Star Wars Celebration. He unfortunately passed a couple of weeks after that. Peter Mayhew is the original person who played Chewbacca, just to let you know, and he actually wore this. This to me is historical, fun, and just legendary. And I think I'll be wearing this along with my other lanyards from the other celebrations when I do go to Star Wars Celebration in LA 2027. That's my plan at this stage. Beautiful. 10 out of 10. Let me put that down. Anyway, so let's get into interviews. Interviews is, any type of interview, but it's been usually the comments in the comment section, usually questions, usually by Michael from Werribee South. And Michael from Werribee South, he's pretty much orchestrated a whole lot of questions for me again. He's a very interested person in Star Wars. He's not a hardcore Star Wars fan yet, but I think he's becoming. Anyway, so the questions, Michael from Werribee South, and anyone can send me questions, not just Michael, anyone. Send me a question, a comment, like this channel if you can, if you like it. I know it's a little bit mundane, but it's just me chatting Star Wars. So, who was the lead scientist for Project Necromancer? Who was the lead scientist for Project Necromancer? It was Royce Hemlock. I think that's how you pronounce it. Royce Hemlock, Dr. Royce Hemlock. It was all about the experimentation with clone facilities. And you see him in live action, and I think also animated. He was not a big character known, only because he came in a period of Star Wars where Star Wars was starting to decline, which is only in the last 5-10 years with, a lot of mainstream people. But an interesting point because he was the lead doctor, scientist for the cloning facilities and serving the Empire, technically. So the next question from Michael from Werribee South, can you believe that? What is the name of the creature Jabba wanted to feed Han and Luke to? That's Han Solo and Luke Skywalker. Well, this, is, pretty basic Star Wars hardcore fan knowledge. It's a Sarlacc pit. It was back in 1983 when we saw this Sarlacc pit. That was Return of the Jedi, episode 6. It was a big hole in the sand with tentacles, and that was it. In the later re-releases of Star Wars Special Edition, a big beak was added to it to give it a bit more menacing feel, as what George Lucas said in the features. I actually thought the original hole was just enough. I thought that was just great as it was. That's one thing that I'd say I wouldn't have redone if I was George Lucas, but that's what George Lucas wanted, and that's the story as we know it. And it was a Sarlacc pit, yes. It was a very creative idea. Who would have thought of a big mouth in the sand as a monster? What an idea. Anyway, so let's go to the next question. What was one condition for Jango Fett's clone DNA being used? What was the one condition for Jango Fett's clone DNA being used? Jango Fett was the dad of Boba Fett, legendary, and he was really featured in Attack of the Clones, which is episode 2. And I met that particular actor just at the last celebration in Japan. It was basically he wanted an unaltered version, which was technically Boba Fett, an unaltered version of all this cloning to be done for himself. He just wanted it for himself, an unaltered cloned version, and that was Boba Fett, his son. Anyway, so let's get into the next question. What legendary item was created by the first Mandalorian Jedi? Not only did you have a Mandalorian and Jedis, you had a Mandalorian Jedi. That's big time. That's like mixing chocolate and mint and having choc mint. Double greatness in a way. It was the Darksaber. It's a very unusual lightsaber. It sort of looks like a blade. It's black with a white glow around it. I think the white glow is so you can see it. I think that's the whole purpose of the white glow. But it's essentially a black lightsaber with a bit of more of a blade look to it. It's a prized possession. I think they were trying to make an ultimate type of lightsaber. Iconic. I think the most iconic lightsaber is always going to be, Anakin's into Luke's blue lightsaber. I think that's the most iconic one, which I have one here signed by Anakin Skywalker himself, Hayden Christensen, and has been held by his son Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker. I've had many. I even got Ahmed Best, Jar Jar Binks, to hold that in a fan photo and everything like that. So the Darksaber is the answer to that question. Palpatine. The next question by Michael from Werribee South is: Palpatine was a senator from what planet? Naboo. Just lets me answer it that way. Naboo. The next question was: who is the Prime Minister of Kamino? Just a little bit of a fun fact before I answer the question. Kamino is also, but spelt with a C, in my background, which I'm Australian, with a Maltese background, which is under Italy in Europe. And one of the islands is called Kamino. And every time I see or hear that name when I'm in Malta, I just think of Star Wars, being a hardcore Star Wars fan that I am, in my own right. And it's spelled with a C. The one that's in Star Wars is spelled with a K. Who was our Prime Minister? It was Lama Su. That's the answer. So now, the next question is a pretty big answer of a question, but it's answered simply, and it's a simple question. What is the Jedi Code? This is from Michael from Werribee South. What is the Jedi Code? The Jedi Code is essentially the belief, the rituals that Jedis must follow. You cannot love or attachment, and you can't really marry and stuff like that. You've got to protect your protector of people, your about peace, your things like that. It's just a way of life. Sort of like if you were to become a police officer in sort of a way, or if you would become a person of the army, you've got a whole set of rules to follow. It's just rules. Rules and regulation. What is a Jedi Code? Rules and regulation, which has many little points to it, which are, I think, good and some bad. I think the fact that Jedi can't love really put a big dampener in trying to find girls out there amongst us Star Wars fans, thinking, "Oh, look, I'm a Jedi, but I can't love. What do I do now?" Anyway, there's things you could do, but let's not go there. Anyway, the final question from Michael from Werribee South, part of Melbourne, Australia. Werribee South is, just to let you know. What Star Wars theories do you personally believe to be true? There were so many theories, but I think the one theory that sticks in my head, which was one of the most exciting times in Star Wars because it was starting to move forward, was the whole, who is Snoke? Who is Snoke? Snoke was the main villain that we were introduced to in Force Awakens. Us Star Wars fans, especially myself, thought that was going to be a connection, or is, Darth Plagueis. And then it sort of eventuated to be a clone, just a bit of a spoiler there, and it was connected and being puppeteered by Emperor Palpatine, bit of a spoiler there. But yeah, I thought that, the theories I personally believe that a lot of people were talking about was who was Snoke, and a lot of us were thinking it was Darth Plagueis or connected to Darth Plagueis, and I just thought that had a lot of greatness to story ideas, but it just didn't eventuate, and we got the story as it is now. Anyway, so that's the show for this time around. Until next time, my friends, keep rocking.